I don't think I've seen a release as hyped as Ark Nova during the entire time I've been into board games. Sure, every Stonemaier game usually gets both the fans and haters all up in a frenzy, but this seemed like the second coming of Gloomhaven from the sheer amount of excitement in the community. But what makes Ark Nova a true standout is not the fact that it was hyped to high heavens, but that despite seemingly insurmountable expectations, the game still managed to blow everyone away. I'd love to say that I disagree, highlight a bunch of glaring flaws that everyone else missed, and tell you that anyone recommending Ark Nova is a clueless idiot. It'd certainly do wonders in attracting some attention to the channel. But the truth is that, just like pretty much everyone else, I think Ark Nova is an absolutely phenomenal game, well worth adding into anyone's collection. Though, as with any review, I think the more important question is not whether a game is recommended, but why? To start with, there's the theme of the game. In Ark Nova, players take on the role of Matt Damon and are tasked with developing a zoo, putting up animals, working with sponsors and universities, partnering up with zoos across the globe, and contributing to various conservation projects. Sure, some of these elements are more than a little abstracted, like the universities or partnerships with zoos, but on the whole, it's a theme you can't help but love. Even if you start playing Ark Nova as a pure Euro and focus just on scoring points, I feel like the theme slowly drags you in, and before long you start basing decisions less on what is going to score you the most points, and more on what are the steps you need to take to get some cute bear living in your zoo. You would need to be one hell of a cold-hearted bastard to draw a red panda, look it straight in the eye, and decide, "Eat glass!" And there are so many more elements where the theme absolutely shines. One of my personal favorites is the conservation projects. At first glance, and from a strictly practical point of view, this is nothing more than a goal players can work towards to earn some points, but it also makes such brilliant thematic sense in the game, especially when you get some projects that specifically require you to release an animal from your zoo, losing some of the appeal since, well, that animal's not in your zoo anymore, but scoring big on the conservation track. Speaking of appeal and conservation, I love the fact that the game end is triggered when these two tracks overlap, hammering home the point that, as a zoo, you should aim to balance maximizing your appeal to customers with your contribution to animal preservation and well-being. Of course, a game can only get by so far on theme alone. You gotta have solid gameplay to back this up, and boy does Ark Nova have solid gameplay. The core of the game revolves around 5 action cards: animals, sponsors, association, cards, and build. Here's the kicker though, exactly what you're able to do with these action cards depends on where in the row they are. For example, a build 5 will let you build an enclosure of any size up to the largest 5 space. But if your build card's in the first spot, all you're gonna manage is a measly 1 space enclosure or a kiosk. And as any card you use immediately goes back to the first spot, pushing the rest forward, it creates a fascinating core puzzle for the game, forcing players to constantly weigh up their actions, decide when it's worth to use a weaker version of the card versus shifting strategies and doing something else until that card moves up. When it may be good to make a suboptimal move just because it generates some income that could be reinvested into what you actually want to do, and whether the gains from a card 3 turns from now outweigh the benefit of getting a smaller gain right now. That is already enough to make for an engaging board game, but add on top the ability to upgrade your action cards to a better version and only being able to upgrade at most 4 out of 5. Plus the tokens that let you increase the power of the cards, and that one part of Ark Nova alone becomes deeper than the combination of all the elements in some other Euros. It doesn't stop there either. The game also has a tile laying portion, which I would probably normally say feels stacked on, but is actually right at home in Ark Nova, enhancing the theme further with ideas like needing to have some enclosures next to rocks or water for certain animals, or being able to build specific enclosures like a petting zoo or an aviary to house specific types of animals. And as if that wasn't enough, there's also a huge deck of cards with various animals, sponsors, and additional conservation projects.
Do you think maybe he's compensating for something?
All with their own requirements, effects, and potential synergies for you to figure out, manage, and utilize to their full effect. It really sounds like when the question of what mechanism to put in the game came up during the design process, the answer was yes. However, as overstuffed as Ark Nova may sound, I have never found the game to be unapproachable or its gameplay elements to be too convoluted or superfluous, and I think that again comes back to just how well the theme was implemented throughout the entire design process. Yes, there are a lot of different elements and moving pieces, but they all make thematic sense for what you are trying to accomplish in the game, making it much easier to both explain and understand Ark Nova. If there's one element that could prove contentious for some in the game, it'd have to be the art. Ark Nova opts for photographs, or at least what look like photographs with at most a filter applied to them, instead of proper artwork. I myself was firmly in that camp, and held out on buying the game for a while, at least in part due to my skepticism on the art. But after playing the game multiple times, I can assure you it's a non-issue. Since it's consistent throughout the game, the photos do not stand out or distract during gameplay. The realistic look helps enhance the theme, and really, I'm not sure that having drawn animals would have fit the game as well. Now, if you wanted to get nitpicky about it, there are a few extra points to raise. First up, the game is quite long, usually taking around 2 to 3 hours, without much to do on other players' turn. So personally, my favorite way to play is either 2 players, or at most 3 if everyone knows what they're doing. Another point is that the huge amount of choice and decisions to make also sure gives analysis paralysis prone players something to AP about, which could drag the game on even longer. Finally, there really isn't much in terms of player interaction. There's a few cards that introduce some take-that mechanisms, but even the rulebook itself says you can do away with them by using the solo game effects if you don't like take-that. Besides that, the majority of the interaction is primarily taking cards or tokens other players wanted to take. Although there are a few sponsor cards I've seen where the effect does depend on what other players at the table do, like giving you money for every predator played by others. Ark Nova is a very easy game to recommend. If your collection is needing a new, deep, thematically rich game, it's hard to find many games that would fit the bill better than Ark Nova. The nitpicks barely make a dent in the phenomenal package. The mechanics, though abundant and complex, create so much choice you're unlikely to exhaust the pool of potential strategies anytime soon, while the theme neatly ties all the separate elements together and makes the game much more accessible. I honestly believe that if you don't own a copy of Ark Nova yet, you're doing yourself a disservice and should fix that as soon as possible. And to think that this is Matthias Wigg's first ever design, safe to say,
we will watch your career with great interest.